Israel Diaries Part 5, Engedi Springs and Elah Valley. Engedi Springs, a place where an encounter between Saul and David is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 24 verses 1 to 15. So, as I have spoken in my previous videos, the people of Israel used to encamp in the places where there are springs or water source, because water is source of life. So David uh, had encamped in this place, this is called Engedi Springs, when he was in exile, running away from Saul, who was after David to take his life away. So this is a waterfall, and people from different parts of Israel, especially the regions of Jerusalem that is close to this place, they bring their kids to play in the water, frolic in the water there. So this is a waterfall. So these are the snaps of Engedi Springs. These are the fauna and the arid condition that you can see in Engedi Springs. So some of the snaps taken from that place.
Further up, the Engedi Spring. And this is also the setting for 1 Samuel chapter 24, related to a time when David was forced to flee out here into the Judean desert, and Saul chased him across that desert, was trying to kill him. And so, as you probably remember, David had already been anointed as the next king of Israel before he even slew Goliath as a teenage boy. But then again, Saul would not step down, despite the fact that God was very clear about his decision. And during the following years, David was forced to flee from King Saul. And so I'll read verse 1 and following in 1 Samuel 24. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of Engedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. These are the ibex that are all around. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, 'You I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish.'" Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hands on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed." And this is the bottom line here: because he is the Lord's anointed. As I pointed out before, David was far from being perfect like Jesus, but he had the sincere desire to do and follow the will of God. And you can really see that here. I mean, just imagine the temptation just to finish it off. I mean, it's hard, to live out here with all those hundreds of bitter men, all kinds of vigilantes, that were out here with David. It was a motley crew of all kinds of different renegades and people that were bitter. And David is here. He had already been promised the throne, right? Yet he has to wait patiently. And I think this is really the way a godly man or woman will act: to wait for God to act in his own right time, not to take matters into your own hands, as Saul did oftentimes. So this is the setting of the cave. The cave would have been further up, most likely, but not too far away from the water. The only reason why he was here in the first place was the water, obviously, right? And so there's the lower waterfall, and then there's also the start of the trail that will take you up to the upper waterfall, okay? And so let's set up a time now. The time is just after 12. Let's agree to meet back down there no later than 12:45. 12:45. Okay, look at your watch, everyone. You'll be on your own. 12:45 is our deadline. Takes at least 10 to 15 minutes to walk back.
Yeah, many years ago, we went up right up there to Diaries, very end up there. Just be very careful, it's very slippery. Okay, so it's very narrow. I wouldn't encourage people, older to go. All right, so just be watchful.
And so it's several hundred meters uphill, but very steep. It's a staircase, okay? And so if you are going to do that, please go now. You'll follow the sign over this and up. Don't go beyond the upper waterfall, okay? Don't try to reach any of the other sites. Just follow the signs to the upper waterfall, and then you work your way back along the trail, and we'll meet down at the bottom there by the bathroom, okay?
Going up, I'll take you on.
So early 1990s. The last one, I think, was in 1992, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, as far as we know, it's gone extinct. And so large predators
Engedi
very well.
Valley, the place where an encounter between David and Goliath, a very popular story that we can read from the Bible. This happened in the Elah Valley. These are some snaps of the Elah Valley. On the right, we can see the actual dried up brook from where David collected the 5 smooth stones. So this is the brook, and this is a general photo of the Elah Valley. And on the left, this is a photo adapted from the Bible places. Here we can see this is the tree line that shows the brook, and this is a foot of the Sukkot, which Palestinians had a base, and Saul and his army stood on the other side. So this is from 1 Samuel 17 verses 3 onwards.
Alright, so
One last time.
we're in the Elah Valley at the very site of the battle between David and Goliath. In fact, this is one of the most detailed descriptions of a biblical battle, especially with regard to the geography. And so, as you know, the Bible is not primarily an historical book, it's a theological book, but there are a lot of facts that are incorporated in that. But in the story of the battle between David and Goliath, a number of key coordinates are provided to help us pinpoint the exact location of the battle. And so we're told, I'm going to just read straight out of 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. So Socoh, where's Socoh? Right there, that hill, the next hill over. Okay, so that's Socoh. They pitched camp at Ephes Damim. Ephes Damim is right where that big building is. Right now there's a gas station, not far from Socoh. Between Socoh and Azekah. So now we know where Socoh is. Ephes Damim is over there. Azekah is right there. Okay? So we have these 3 coordinates. Socoh, Ephes Damim, and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill. Which side? Which side were the Philistines? That one, okay? And the Israelites, another, with a valley between them. Okay, so if this is where the Philistines are, where are the Israelites? Right there, with a valley between them. And then goes on to describe a scenario. A champion named Goliath who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. In other words, we have a human tank, okay, heading towards the Israelite lines. The lions stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Right? By the way, the fact that the Philistines came from the Aegean Sea meant that this was a very common thing. You know that back in the day, they weren't much of an army. Okay, I mean, we're nowadays used to a professional army, but that was not the case in ancient times. There were some professional warriors like Goliath, but most of the army, both on the Philistine side and the Israelite side, were farmers, which just ordinary people would just pick their weapons or work tools and would come to the battlefield. And so to have two armies, professional armies, go to each other was very, costly. It didn't make much sense. And so they would oftentimes offer these surrogate sort of combats between two champions. The only problem for the Israel was that they didn't have someone like Goliath. So it was very easy for him to offer that challenge. And so over the next days, he comes every morning. Remember, he came from Gath, which is just about 10 kilometers this way. So that became his day job for a little while. And he shouts all kinds of curses at the Israelites, mocking them, and even defying the name of God. In the meantime, David, remember? He had already been anointed as the next king. He's a boy. We don't know how old, maybe 15, maybe 16 years old. And his father, Jesse, sends him over to the battle site to do what? To bring some groceries to his older brothers who were here with Saul in the camp. And when David hears about that giant that defiles the name of God, he's filled with rage. And this is the good type of rage, okay? He's not here to gain a reputation for himself. He's here to fight God's battle and to do what is right. And this is exactly the point here, the motivation, right, to do and to engage that giant. And Saul looks at him, he doesn't, think much of him. He's a boy, even gives him his armor, and he probably looked very funny with it. He could hardly walk. And he takes it off and he says, "Don't worry about it. The battle is ours." And so I'm just going to jump right into the climax of this account. He runs down and he takes his staff in his hand, verse 40 and following. "Choose 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in the pouch of a shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approach the Philistine." Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was a little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome.
Valley, the place where an encounter between David and Goliath, a very popular story that we can read from the Bible. This happened in the Elah Valley.